Hi, everybody. It's Patricia Coughlin here. I have been asked by some subscribers to discuss the issue of the patient's will and its role in the psychotherapeutic process. This topic of addressing the patient's will to be there in the therapy and to engage in the therapeutic tasks is one that goes back to Reich, and it was certainly adopted and incorporated in the work of Habib Davanloo. But I think there's an awful lot of misunderstanding about the role of will and how to understand it and how to work with it therapeutically. So again, this is a complex topic, and it may take much more than one video to really sort out. But let's deal at the most sort of basic concrete level to start with, which is, finding out and assessing whether the patient is actually coming to see you of their own will or under a great deal of pressure or even a mandate, right, from somebody else. So let's say it's court ordered or something like that. Again, that's an unusual situation for someone in private practice. But if someone is being, in a sense, forced, again, you must make sure that you don't ally with the third party, but that you engage the person. So you were referred by the courts, or you're here because your wife gave you an ultimatum. But what about you? I mean, on one hand, nobody had a gun to your head. So is there something you want help with, right? So, I mean, I can think of cases where somebody came because, again, they were in trouble with their wife, and the wife had her own concerns. But when I addressed that, well, that's what she wants, right? But what about you? What do you want? You're here. And is there something you want to address? And in this case, he said, yeah. And it was a topic, again, quite different from what his wife wanted him to work on. But I have to create an alliance with the person sitting in front of me. So we wouldn't accept the will of a third party, but we would question what the patient's will is, if they want to be there at all, and if so, to address what and to achieve what. And so that's really your first order of business. But even there, patients can have a great deal of conflict about their will. Consciously, they might say, oh yeah, I want to be here. I'm here, of my own volition. I'm paying my own money. And yet there's a part of them that isn't willing to open up or to actually engage in the task at hand. So there you have a conflict. And this is what I most often see, and what, in a sense, we expect to see. We expect our patients to be ambivalent and conflicted when they come to see a therapist, right? Wanting a result, wanting to get better, to be relieved of suffering, but not necessarily to want to have to do what they have to do to get there. Now, hopefully we understand that, and we have ways of working with. This connects to my, video just a week or so ago about the twin forces of alliance and resistance. You don't want to just make room for one or the other, but to understand and to really speak to the conflict between the two parts of the person. That on the one hand, you're here of your own will, investing your time and money, but on the other hand, you're detached and uninvolved and really not wanting to open up, right? So you want to identify and then intensify that conflict. If you side too strongly with the resistance, which I've certainly seen advocated and even, illustrated in cases where It's only the patient's reluctance that is spoken to. Okay, so yeah, you're really not at all sure you want to be here. Well, I guess you really don't. And if you don't, then I don't have any right to ask you about it. And again, it's to me, it's concrete and simplistic just to speak to one element and not to understand the very intense conflicts that patients are suffering with. It's as if you want them to be in a place they're not. You're wanting to insist that they're not conflicted when they are. And I even had a recent example in a supervision where the therapist was coming down very strongly on, well, I guess you don't have any will to be here and you don't want to do this. And you have to decide, do you want to do it or not? And the patient, to his credit, was able to speak up and say, it's not as easy as that. I'm really struggling. I mean, I do want to, but I'm also afraid, or I'm not really sure how to. I mean, I need some help, right? So I just want to urge you again to understand and to identify and then intensify the patient's conflict, which is sometimes between their conscious and unconscious mind or between two parts of them. And you can also see, even though the scenario that I just elucidated is more common, which is consciously they want to be there, but unconsciously you're seeing all kinds of contradictory signs. I've also seen the opposite, where someone is quite overtly resistant, saying, yeah, I don't know why I'm here anyway. I mean, I think therapy is a crock of horse shit. Again, if you're concrete and you're just dealing with the conscious content, you're missing the fact that, okay, despite the fact you're saying that, you're here, okay? And nobody had a gun to your head. So their desire for help is unconscious. Okay. And so, again, you don't want to miss that, right? You want to pick that up. So, on the one hand, you're saying, yeah, this whole thing is a crock of horse shit. I don't, and yet you're here, right? You got yourself here, and there has to be a part of you, right, that wants some kind of help. Or, as in one case I'm thinking of, this woman was 69 years old. She had been going for help for decades and not getting it. And so there was this tiny part of her that was still hoping against hope, but she was referred by her physician, and she was really, and I even said to her, it's like you're afraid to open up and even hope that you could possibly get help. You've been so disappointed, so hurt. She was so angry, right? And so again, we had to take up straight away all of her intense mixed feelings toward helpers, right? And as long as that was there but being defended against, we wouldn't get anywhere. So I invited her, right, to face her feelings of anger, right, that were fueling this kind of dismissive attitude. So again, I hope at least as we begin to discuss this issue, you will become curious about the issue of the will. You'll start to see it as more complex and a matter of conflict, and not just taking someone's, you know, content words so literally, when you're also getting other signals that maybe there's a little part of them that does want to get help, and that you can speak to both parts of this, both the wish and the fear around opening up, engaging. The fact is, the person is there, right? What should we do together? The other thing that I find, particularly when, we're talking about the will to be there in the first place, and then there's also the willingness to do particular therapeutic tasks. And the word I just used is a big shift. I went from just talking about people's will. What's your will? Is this what you want to do? What are you going to do about it? Um, Really, that kind of pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of thing, which can often produce strong feelings towards you and end up then in a battle between patient and therapist. That's not what we want. We want to intensify the patient's internal struggle. So I have found that just by switching from using the word will to willing, you're here. Are you willing to engage? Should we give it a try? Are you willing to tell me what the problems are instead of, where's your will and where? So, again, just really tip of the iceberg here, right, with this complex issue. But again, I hope you will dig into it, not take it too literally, discover the conflict responsible, and intensify that so that you can really get moving with your patients. So, questions, comments, reflections on this, I think, somewhat controversial issue, especially in ISTDP. And I'll talk to you after the holiday. Thanks. Bye bye.